A quiet family dinner turns into a life-altering revelation when a young boy innocently exposes a hidden truth that shatters trust and changes his father forever. The soft glow of warm lights filled the grand dining room, reflecting gently off polished marble floors and crystal glassware. Everything looked perfect, almost too perfect. The long dining table was set with care, every plate aligned, every detail in place, as if nothing in the world could disturb this moment. The father sat at the head of the table, his posture straight, his expression calm. He reached for his glass, taking a slow sip of water, trying to settle into what was meant to be a peaceful evening. Across from him, his wife forced a faint smile, her fingers nervously tracing the edge of her plate. She avoided his eyes, focusing instead on anything that could distract her from the silence. Their young son sat quietly between them, unusually still. Normally, he would be talking, laughing, filling the room with innocent energy. But tonight, he was different. His small hands rested in his lap, his gaze shifting between his parents, as if he could sense something neither of them had said out loud. A gentle clink of cutlery broke the silence, but it didn't last long. The air felt heavy, like something invisible was sitting at the table with them. Why did this dinner feel so uncomfortable when everything looked so right? The father cleared his throat softly, trying to bring some normalcy back. "Long day?" he asked, his voice calm but searching. His wife nodded quickly. "Yes, just a little tired," she replied, her tone light, but her eyes betrayed her. There was something restless in them, something she was trying hard to hide. He studied her for a brief moment, then looked down at his plate. Something isn't right. But what is she hiding? Their son picked at his food quietly, glancing up every now and then. His innocent eyes moved between them, noticing every pause, every silence that stretched. Just a little too long. The ticking of a clock echoed faintly in the background, each second making the silence feel louder. The father tried again, offering a small smile to his son. "How was your day, champ?" The boy hesitated before answering, as if unsure whether it was safe to speak. "It was okay," he said softly. That hesitation didn't go unnoticed. The father leaned back slightly, his calm expression beginning to crack under the weight of quiet tension. This wasn't how their dinners used to be. Something had changed, and whatever it was sitting right here with them. His wife reached for her glass, but her hand trembled just enough to make the water ripple. She quickly steadied it, hoping no one had seen. But he had. The silence returned, deeper this time. Not peaceful, but uneasy. And in that quiet moment it became clear, this was not just another dinner. Something was waiting beneath the surface, ready to be revealed. Sometimes the quietest moments hide the loudest truths. The quiet clinking of cutlery continued, but now it felt louder, sharper, almost unsettling. The father sat still, his eyes slowly moving between his wife and his son, observing what he had tried to ignore just moments ago. Something had changed. He watched his wife carefully. She kept her gaze lowered, focusing on her plate as if it demanded all her attention. Every time he looked at her, she seemed to find something else to do. Adjusting her napkin, taking small sips of water, or simply pretending to be busy. It wasn't like her. She had always met his eyes with warmth, with confidence. But tonight, there was distance. A quiet distance he couldn't explain. His fingers tightened slightly around his fork as a thought crossed his mind. Why is she avoiding me like this? He shifted his attention to his son, hoping for some sense of normalcy. But even there, something felt off. The boy was unusually silent, his usual spark missing. He didn't ask for anything, didn't smile, didn't even look up much. Instead, he seemed to be watching, quietly observing in a way that felt far too aware for a child his age. The father leaned forward slightly, trying to catch his son's eyes. But the boy quickly looked down again, pushing his food around his plate without taking a real bite. Why was his own child acting like a stranger at this table? A subtle tension began to build inside him, slow but steady. It wasn't loud or obvious, but it was there, growing with every passing second. Every avoided glance, every pause that lasted just a little too long. He exhaled softly, trying to stay calm. Maybe he was overthinking. Maybe it was just one of those days. But deep down, it didn't feel that simple. He reached for his glass again, his movements controlled, measured. His eyes, however, never stopped observing. He noticed how his wife's hand trembled slightly when she reached for the salt, how she quickly pulled it back, as if afraid of being seen. He noticed how their son's small fingers tightened together under the table, barely visible, but enough. None of this was normal. "Is everything okay?" he finally asked, his voice steady but filled with quiet concern. His wife nodded too quickly. "Of course, everything is fine," she replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The answer came too easily, too rehearsed. The father felt something shift inside him at that moment. A quiet realization that the truth was being hidden, not spoken. The room, once warm and inviting, now felt unfamiliar, like a place where secrets lived in silence. He leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable, but his mind racing. He wasn't just noticing anymore. He was starting to question everything. Because sometimes, it's not the words that reveal the truth. It's the silence between them. The silence at the table had grown heavy, almost unbearable. It lingered in the air, pressing down on every breath, every movement. The father sat still, his mind quietly piecing together the strange behavior he had been noticing. Across from him, his wife kept her eyes lowered, her unease now impossible to hide. And between them, their son sat quietly watching. For a moment, it felt like time itself had slowed. Then suddenly, "Mom, who was that man today?" The boy's soft voice broke through the silence like a crack in glass. Everything stopped. The mother froze instantly, her hand mid-air as she reached for her glass. Her fingers trembled, and for a brief second, she didn't move at all. Her face lost color, her expression shifting from forced calm to pure shock. The father's head lifted slowly, his eyes locking onto his son. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice low, controlled, but now filled with something deeper, something alert. The boy looked up innocently, unaware of the storm he had just begun. "The man you were talking to, before we came home," he continued, his tone simple, honest. A sharp silence followed. The father turned his gaze toward his wife. This time she couldn't look away. Her eyes met his for a brief second, but that was all it took. Fear, panic, guilt. It was all there, hidden just beneath the surface. "What man?" His heartbeat slowed, not out of calm, but out of focus. Every detail suddenly felt important. Every second mattered. "What man is he talking about?" the father asked quietly, his voice steady but firm. The mother swallowed, her lips parting slightly as if to speak, but no words came out. She looked down again, avoiding his gaze, her silence louder than anything she could have said. The boy shifted in his seat, sensing the sudden tension but not understanding it. "He was tall. And you looked upset, Mom," he added softly. That one sentence changed everything. The father's expression hardened slightly, his calm beginning to fade. He leaned forward, his attention now completely fixed on his wife. "You want to explain that?" he asked. There was no anger yet, just a quiet demand for truth. The mother's hands tightened in her lap. Her breathing grew uneven. She looked trapped, not by the question but by the truth behind it. How could one innocent question carry so much weight? The room no longer felt like a home. It felt like a place where something hidden was finally stepping into the light. The father didn't speak again. He didn't need to. The silence now belonged to her. And in that silence, everything had already begun to change. Sometimes the most innocent words reveal the deepest secrets. The air in the room felt different now. Heavier, sharper, as if every word carried weight. The father sat still, his gaze fixed on his wife, waiting. Not rushing, not raising his voice, just waiting. Because sometimes, silence forces the truth out faster than anger ever could. His wife shifted in her seat, her fingers tightly intertwined in her lap. She opened her mouth to speak, then stopped. Her eyes moved briefly toward their son before dropping again, as if searching for something safe to hold on to. "It's nothing," she said finally, her voice soft, almost fragile. "He must have misunderstood." But the words didn't feel real. The father didn't respond right away. Instead, he leaned back slightly, studying her face, her movements, the hesitation between her words. He had known her for years, long enough to recognize when she was hiding something. "She's not telling me everything." His eyes flickered with quiet realization. "Misunderstood?" he repeated calmly. "He described someone. That doesn't sound like confusion." His tone wasn't harsh, but it carried a quiet firmness that left no space to escape. The boy sat silently, looking between them again, his small face filled with uncertainty. He hadn't meant to cause this. He had only spoken what he saw. The mother took a slow breath, trying to steady herself. "It was just someone from the store," she said quickly. "A random conversation. Nothing important." But even as she said it, her voice trembled slightly. The father noticed. He always did. A memory surfaced in his mind. Earlier that evening, the slight delay when she arrived home, the way she avoided his questions, the tension in her voice that he had brushed aside at the time. Now, those small moments were no longer separate. They were connecting, forming something he couldn't ignore. "Then why didn't you mention it?" he asked, his eyes narrowing just a little. There it was. A simple question, but one that carried everything. The mother froze again, caught between truth and the story she was trying to maintain. Her lips parted, but no clear answer came out. Just silence and fear. What was she trying so hard to hide? The father felt a slow shift inside him. Not anger yet, but something deeper. A quiet awareness that the truth was already there, just not fully spoken. He leaned forward slightly, his voice softer now, but more intense. "Look at me," he said. She hesitated, then slowly raised her eyes to meet his. And in that moment he saw it clearly. Not just nervousness, not just confusion, but something far more painful, guilt. The kind that doesn't need words. The room fell silent again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was filled with unspoken truths, waiting just beneath the surface. And the father knew this was only the beginning. Sometimes the smallest lies create the deepest cracks in trust. The silence lingered, thick and suffocating, as if the room itself was holding its breath. The father's eyes remained locked on his wife, searching for something. An explanation, a denial, anything that could make sense of what was unfolding. But before she could speak again, "Mom, you hugged him." The boy's voice was soft, almost hesitant, but clear enough to cut through everything. The father blinked slowly, his expression freezing for just a second. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice lower now, heavier. The boy looked at him innocently, unaware of the impact of his words. "At the store," he continued, "you looked sad. Then you hugged him before we left." The words settled into the room like a storm that had finally arrived. The mother's breath caught instantly. Her face turned pale, and her eyes widened in quiet panic. This time she didn't even try to speak, because there was nothing left to say. The father leaned back slightly, his hand slowly moving away from the table as if the strength had drained from it. His mind replayed the moment over and over, the image forming clearer with each second. A hug. Not just a conversation, not just a stranger, something more. This isn't just a misunderstanding. His chest tightened, not with anger, but with something deeper, something heavier, a quiet kind of pain that comes when the truth begins to unfold in ways you never expected. "Is that true?" he asked finally, his voice calm, too calm. The mother didn't respond. She couldn't. Her silence was louder than any confession. The boy shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension but not understanding it. "I thought you knew," he added softly. "You looked at him like you missed him." That was it. That one sentence changed everything. The father's eyes slowly closed for a brief moment, as if he was trying to steady himself, trying to hold on to something that was already slipping away. How could something so simple feel so devastating? When he opened his eyes again, they were different. Still calm on the surface, but underneath, something had broken. The trust, the certainty, the belief in what he thought his life was. Gone. He looked at his wife again, but this time it wasn't with questions. It was with understanding. Not the kind that brings peace, but the kind that brings truth. The room remained silent, but now it carried weight. Real, undeniable weight. The kind that cannot be ignored, cannot be undone. And in that moment the father realized something painful. The truth had been sitting at the table all along. Sometimes, the truth doesn't need to be revealed. It simply waits for the right moment to be spoken. The silence that followed felt unbearable, like the walls themselves were closing in. The father sat still for a moment, his eyes fixed on the table, his mind trying to process everything his son had just revealed. Then slowly he stood up. The sound of his chair scraping against the floor broke the stillness, sharp and final. His wife flinched slightly, her hands gripping the edge of the table as if she needed something to hold on to. "Who is he?" the father asked. His voice was no longer calm. It was controlled, but filled with emotion that was barely being held back. The mother shook her head quickly, tears already forming in her eyes. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice trembling. "Please, just listen. Then tell me what it is," he interrupted, his voice rising for the first time. The boy sat frozen, his small eyes wide, watching everything unfold. He had never seen his father like this before. The father took a step forward, his breathing uneven now. "You hugged him," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "You looked at him like you knew him, like he meant something to you." His wife's tears slipped down her cheeks, but she still hesitated. And that hesitation said everything. "Why does this hurt more than I expected?" The father ran a hand through his hair, pacing slightly as the weight of the moment crashed over him. "How long?" he asked quietly, his voice now softer, but far more painful. The question hung in the air. How long had this been happening? How long had he not known? The mother finally broke. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I tried to stay away. I really did." The father stopped moving. Those words hit harder than anything else. Not denial, not confusion, but admission. He looked at her slowly, disbelief written across his face. "So it's true," he said, almost to himself. Tears streamed down her face as she nodded faintly, unable to hide anymore. He's someone from my past," she confessed. "I thought it was over, but seeing him again, I didn't expect it." The room felt like it was spinning, the truth finally standing fully exposed between them. The father's shoulders dropped slightly, as if the strength had left him. "And you didn't think to tell me?" he asked, his voice breaking now. "I was afraid," she admitted. "Afraid of losing everything." He let out a hollow laugh, filled with pain. "And what do you think this is?" he said, gesturing around them. "You think we still have everything?" The words cut deep. The boy looked down, his small heart unable to understand, but feeling the pain all the same. The father turned away for a moment, his eyes closing as he tried to hold himself together. But the truth had already done its damage. There was no going back now. When he turned back again, his expression had changed. Not anger, but heartbreak. And that was far worse. Sometimes the truth we hide to protect everything ends up destroying it instead. The room felt heavy, as if the walls themselves carried the weight of the truth that had just been revealed. The father stood motionless, his eyes fixed on his wife, who now sat with her head bowed, silent and trembling. The boy, too young to fully understand, clutched his small hands together, sensing the tension but unable to speak. Every word she had spoken or tried to hide suddenly made sense. The stolen glances, the hesitation, the quiet distance. It all connected in a way that left no room for doubt. The father's chest tightened, his heart pounding painfully with betrayal and disbelief. How could I have missed this all along? He took a step forward, his voice trembling despite his effort to stay composed. "All this time, you were hiding him?" She nodded faintly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered. "I thought I could handle it. I thought it was just a memory, something from the past. But memories don't remain harmless forever," he realized. "They linger, they grow, and sometimes they collide with reality in ways no one expects." The boy looked up, his innocent eyes wide. "Dad, I just told the truth," he said softly, still unaware of the magnitude of his words. The father's gaze shifted from his wife to his son, and in that instant, a wave of grief washed over him. Not at the child, but at the life he thought he had, the trust that had been broken. The world he knew had shattered, leaving only fragments behind. The mother's voice broke again. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I never wanted to hurt anyone." But words could no longer undo the damage. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating, as the father struggled to breathe through the mix of heartbreak, anger, and disbelief. Every emotion collided inside him, leaving him raw and exposed. How could this happen?" he finally whispered, his voice barely audible. "Nothing will ever be the same again." The boy's small presence reminded him that life goes on, even when the foundations crumble. But for tonight, for this family, nothing could be repaired with simple apologies or explanations. The trust, once whole, was fractured, perhaps irreparably. The mother's tears fell freely now, and she reached out, as if to hold onto something familiar. But the father stepped back, the weight of truth keeping him at a distance. The boy shifted in his seat, confused, the innocence of childhood colliding with the harsh reality of grown-up mistakes. The room was quiet, but the echoes of betrayal reverberated in every corner. The father sank into a chair, his hands covering his face, overwhelmed by the realization that the life he thought he knew was gone. Sometimes the truth does more than reveal, it destroys. It changes everything. And sometimes the hardest part isn't
discovering it, but living with it. The room was quiet now, the storm having passed, leaving behind only the fragile remnants of what had been a family in turmoil. The father sat alone at the table, his hands folded, staring at the empty plates in front of him. The boy had been tucked into bed, and his mother had retreated to the bedroom, the weight of the evening pressing on both of them in different ways. He closed his eyes, taking a deep, steadying breath. The events of the night played over and over in his mind, the innocent question, the revelation, the confession, the heartbreak. Each moment had left a mark, each word a scar that couldn't be erased. How do you rebuild trust when it feels like everything is broken? He opened his eyes and looked at the photograph on the wall, a picture of the family from happier times, smiling and unaware of the shadows that now lingered. A tear slipped down his cheek, not of anger this time, but of understanding. Life had taught him a painful lesson tonight, that honesty, no matter how difficult, was the foundation of everything that truly matters. He stood and walked slowly to the window, looking out at the quiet street below. The lights of the city twinkled like distant stars, indifferent to the turmoil of one small household. And yet he felt a strange sense of clarity. He knew that anger and blame could consume him, or he could choose a different path, one that didn't erase the pain but honored the truth. Turning back, he sat down at the table again and picked up a pen and paper. He began to write, not letters of accusation, but a plan for honesty and accountability. Words flowed slowly at first, hesitant but then with purpose. He would face the truth, acknowledge the hurt, and create boundaries that protected the future of his family. He glanced at the empty chair where his son had sat, imagining the little boy's innocent curiosity. It was that innocence that had sparked everything, the question that revealed hidden secrets, the honesty that forced change. And he realized something. Children see things adults often miss. They speak truths adults are too afraid to face. Maybe it's never too late to start over, if you start with honesty. The father took one final deep breath, letting go of the bitterness that had begun to creep in. He understood that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean pretending the night had not shattered their world, but it did mean choosing a path forward with clarity, integrity, and courage. In the quiet aftermath, he whispered softly to himself, "We cannot control the mistakes of the past, but we can decide how we live with the truth." The night had brought heartbreak, revelation, and change, but it had also offered a lesson that would last a lifetime. Sometimes the hardest truths lead to the strongest growth.